And Elle and Taylor are also going to be helping tonight, and I'll let them introduce themselves as well. Elle, you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone. My name is Elle, and I am a senior in the Health and Exercise Science Department at CSU, and I am doing my practicum here at the Kendall Reagan Nutrition Center, and I'm really excited to be cooking with you guys tonight.
Thanks. Taylor?
Hey guys, forgot to unmute myself. So I'm Taylor, and I am a practicum student at the Kendall Reagan Nutrition Center. I am a first-year graduate student in the nutrition department, going for community nutrition. So I hope you all have fun with us tonight.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, so we dressed up for you. If you can tell, we're in our festive holiday gear. We got some red sweaters and some for some glitter. It's a good year to start early with the holiday festivities. So this menu is awesome. I think we tested it like 3 different times because the recipes are fabulous. We're going to use a lot of warm winter spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger. I'll give you a little rundown of what's going to happen. I do want to give you a quick little safety tip. So some knife skills. We're not going to be doing any crazy, meat carving or anything like that tonight, but just as a quick reminder, so holding our knives, we're going to do a quick pinch right here at the base and then roll our fingers around. We have a tendency, to put our pointer right here and lead. You're actually going to get a better grip this way, and then you're not going to run the risk of tilting our knife in any weird direction, right? And then we also have our bear claw. So this is going to be the hand that leads, right? We're going to hold this up against our knife and keep our knuckles in the way so that you're not getting any fingers underneath the knife. So just a quick reminder, couple other things. Again, we're not cooking with raw meat tonight, so we will be using eggs though. So make sure you wash your hands after cracking eggs, and if you get it on the cutting board, just wipe off the cutting board, switch to a new side. Also, pertinent to today, we tend to scroll through our recipes on our phones, but just remember where all your phone has been today, how many surfaces it's been on, how many things it's touched. So I prefer to actually print out my recipes these days. It's a little cleaner. You can kind of control it a little better, keep the germs away. So I'm going to move everybody down here and we'll get everybody situated. So for the rundown of today's class, we're going to start with some eggnog and apple bread pudding cups. And then I'm going to go right into our gingerbread granola, which is eventually going to turn into a trifle cup with yogurt and fruit. And then we're going to go into some savory herb veggie crepes, which are absolutely phenomenal. And then we're going to do an herby hollandaise sauce to go on top of that. So that's a little bit of the rundown. So we will go ahead and get started. We're so grateful you guys are here today. You're an awesome bunch. I think I've probably cooked with a lot of you in person at some point. But if not, then welcome, and we're glad to have you here virtually. So I'll tilt us down, and what we're going to start with our eggnog and apple bread pudding cups. I've already preheated our oven to 375, and I've lined our baking sheet with cupcake liners. You can do this without cupcake liners, but you really need to grease the cups with butter. I prefer the liners, and then we're going to give them just a quick spray, again, to keep everything from sticking. There we go, and we'll set this aside. So we all have those, tried and true holiday breakfast dishes, right? The casserole that mom preps ahead of time and puts in the fridge. This is also a great one that you can prep ahead of time. I have started cubing up our bread. I do as small a cubes as possible, right? Because we're going to be squeezing these into little cups. So I'm going to do our last cup here, and I'm going to move this over here so we can see what's going on. Here we go. So what I did was just cut it into slices here, just like regular size slices. And then again, just cubing it. And we're going to do 3 cups filled with those cubes. I already have about 2 cups in there, so I'll do another couple of slices to get that in there. And again, the smaller the better. I think it just fits a little better when you have all of that in there. So we'll keep cutting here. I think that's probably good. So to this, we're going to also cube our apple. So You do not have to include an apple in this recipe. I really like it. I think that it adds a crispness, adds a little bit, obviously, of a healthy component, a little bit of fiber there, some brightness to cut through the sweetness of the eggnog. So I've peeled it. I do not have a core, so the way that I like to do this is just cut it down 4 sides. So we've got 1, 2, 3, and then 4. We can just toss this. So then we're going to do the same thing with the apple. We're going to cube it as small as possible. These, obviously are going to cook better the smaller they are. So we're just going to keep doing that. And we're going to toss this into the exact same bowl as our bread, just like this. Okay. And again, what I love about this is you can prep right up until the end. You can be slicing these apples the night before. As long as you get them in there with the eggnog, they're not going to brown. Or you could wait until, the day of to slice those apples, toss them in with the bread, save yourself some time. Nobody likes to spend all of their holiday mornings in the kitchen, especially if you're hosting a bunch of people. I understand that having a house full of people with a kitchen full of people is not conducive to cooking. So here we go. We've got our bowl of apple and bread, and we're just gonna stir this around right here. Just toss it together. And then we're gonna fill up our cups. So the way I like to do this is just with a spoon. You can fill these all the way to the top and even squish them down a little bit. So I like to use my fingers, use a spoon, and if you can see what I'm doing, I'm just filling them all the way up to the top of the liners here. Press them down a little bit because we're gonna fill this with eggnog. And it'll kind of float a little bit. It'll fill to the top. So being able to fill them all the way up is great. And you might have a little left over, that's fine. And again, this is the individual version of this. You can always do the casserole version, right? Like the 9x13, pop it in the fridge, cover it with saran wrap. That's also easy, especially for family. I just think these are really cute when they're in little individual servings for guests when they come over, and you can just pop them onto a plate or a warmer. I'm just gonna use my hands, that seems to be working better. You can hear my cat in the background. She's got a lot to say about this class. Okay. With our last couple cups here. Rearrange a few pieces. Beautiful. So you can just see I filled up all 12 cups all the way to the top. Keep squishing them down a little bit. So we'll move this over here, and then we're gonna mix our eggnog mixture. So I've got another small bowl, just big enough to hold our eggnog. And then right here, I've got 2.5 cups of eggnog. Something to note here, I'm sure if you like eggnog, you've seen in the stores, there are about 1 million different varieties now. So you can do the good old fashioned, regular eggnog, or I'm using a silk soy eggnog. Honestly, it tastes the same to me. There's also like an almond milk one, so you can tailor this to your family, whatever your needs are. To this, I'm gonna whisk in 3 whole eggs. So I'll just plop that in there. And we also have here, this is a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon and about 1/8 teaspoon of nutmeg. Nutmeg can be really spicy. You can add as much as you want. I like to keep it kind of minimal just to make sure it fits everybody's tastes. So we'll whisk this together. It's really important to get those eggs, really broken up in there so you don't just get like scrambled egg cups. And we got the cinnamon going everywhere as well. And like I said, this is super easy to just do the night before, and then you've already got it prepped and ready to go. You can actually, we're gonna pour this mixture, once I get it all whisked up, over top of the cups. You can do that, cover it with saran wrap with the eggnog in it. It's actually gonna be really nice. It's gonna help to like really absorb in that bread. And then it gets really nice and tasty. Okay, I think that we have this good and whisked up. We'll leave this in here. And the way I like to do this is just with a ladle. It gets a little messy, but that's all right. It's the holidays. We can have a little fun in the kitchen. So we'll just ladle this right over the cups, and I will switch directions here so I can show you what I'm doing. when I come over here, I'm filling these up as much as they will possibly go. I think that you're gonna have plenty of eggnog in here, and why not, right? We wanna fill up the whole thing. It's not really gonna rise. It'll puff up a little bit like a souffle, but then it kind of deflates after you bring it back. So it's totally fine. Keep filling these up, just like that. I keep kind of whisking to make sure that the cinnamon and the nutmeg stay incorporated because it likes to float, which is fine, but you don't want all of it to end up in one ladle and then another cup not get any. There we go. So I also saw that there's like pumpkin eggnog now. You can get like cinnamon eggnog. If you find one that you just love and you don't really feel like altering the flavors with the spices, that's totally fine too. I have not tried it with the pumpkin, but it sounded absolutely delicious. Okay, just a few more to go here. I'm curious to know, you can put it in the chat, what your go-to holiday morning casseroles are, or like, you know, those family dishes that everybody seems to just go back to every year. At our house, it was always like a sweet kind of like French toast casserole my dad would put together for us. It was so good. So this is gonna be newly on my list because it was absolutely delicious. Okay, so we got our last one here. Filling these guys up. See if I can give you an aerial view of what I'm doing here. And then we are going to sprinkle some toppings on it. So I've got all of our cups filled. They're filled completely to the top. Can't tilt it too much. And then this is just a little extra. So in our bowl, I have about 2 tablespoons of sugar and about 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon. And you can just mix these two together and sprinkle them on top. You can do this, you can take it or leave it. I think it gives a really nice kind of added crunch to it. So I'm just gonna sprinkle this over top. I like to be pretty liberal because who doesn't need a little extra sugar on top of their breakfast? But it's the holidays, right? So it's probably fine. That's what I decided. Getting a little sprinkle here. And you could also be creative with what you want to mix in. You could put a touch of nutmeg in here. You could also just do like a pumpkin pie spice. That's my favorite, you know, easy kind of quick blend. And I think it's cinnamon, some cloves, and some nutmeg. So it's kind of an easy route to go. Okay, so that's what we've got going with these. What we're gonna do is cover now. We're just gonna put the foil right on top. You don't even have to pinch it around the edges. I just like to leave it. It's just gonna keep the top from getting really crispy because we put sugar on it. So in the high heat, it'll caramelize. So I'm gonna pop these in the oven. And these are just gonna go in for 30 minutes. So I'll start our cute little pig egg timer for 30 minutes. And then after 30 minutes, what we're gonna do is take the foil out and give them another good 10 minutes. Okay? What questions do we have about this? Let's see. Okay, so some folks still need the recipes, so we'll make sure to get those sent over. Awesome. My mom makes a yummy farmer's casserole. Oh, that sounds delicious. Eggs Benedict. I love it. That's a complicated one. Maybe you can give us some pointers on the holidays as well. Any other questions on the eggnog bread pudding? Give me just a second. Okay. We're going to transition over here. I'm going to move this so we don't have to listen to the clicking. We are going to, does it work with wheat bread? Absolutely. That's a great question. So the most important thing is you kind of wanted a little stale. I went with a sourdough because I like the kind of tanginess of it. You can use like a challah bread. The sturdier the bread, the better, because it's really going to absorb a lot of that. Again, if you leave it in the fridge overnight and it absorbs more of that eggnog, wheat would be an awesome way to get some whole grains in there. Absolutely. Or like a whole grain. Yeah, great question. So just leave it out on the counter, let it get a little stale. Okay. So now we're going to switch over. We are going to prep our gingerbread granola. This is so delicious. It is you know, really that warm kind of festive gingery, like a little spicy. You can, again, there's so many substitutions you can do with this, and I'll kind of take you through the ones that I have done. So we're gonna start with our oats. These are rolled oats. I've got a cup of rolled oats, and I'm just gonna toss it in here, and we can get that mixed up. And then the recipe, if you have it in front of you, calls for half a cup of mixed nuts. We don't eat nuts in my house, and so I've done half a cup of pepitas, which are like pumpkin seeds. I did the raw ones because we don't want to over roast them, but I think these are absolutely delicious. It adds the same level of crunch, but it doesn't get, you know, overly nutty, or if you have an allergy or anything like that. So it's a great way to kind of customize that. Drop that in there. And then we have a 1/4 teaspoon of our fine grain salt. I used pink Himalayan salt. You can just pop it in like a coffee grinder if you want to just get an extra fine, but you don't want any big, you know, chunks of salt in there. So we'll toss that in. We're just mixing all the dry ingredients right now. Then we have our half a teaspoon of cinnamon, again, that kind of a classic warm winter spice. And then we have our ground ginger. So this is half a teaspoon of ground ginger. I love this. I think it gives this recipe such a distinctive gingerbready flavor that I really haven't found from other granola recipes. So I really, really loved this. And then we're gonna drop in, the recipe calls for dried cranberries. I used golden raisins. I think these are really delicious, about a tablespoon. Again, you can do any kind of dried fruit that you're looking for. So I'm gonna take this and we're gonna just mix it together. I'm just gonna use a fork. You can use, you know, whatever you want here. Toss this around. Okay, so we just have this. It's just kind of, you know, lightly mixed up. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna combine our wet ingredients. So tilt this down a little bit. So in my little Tupperware here, I have 2 tablespoons of honey and 1 tablespoon of molasses. If you guys have not worked with molasses before, I highly recommend it. It has the most incredibly rich flavor. It's sweet, kind of, but it blends well with sweet things and really brings out that kind of spicy, warm, deep winter flavor. So to that, we're just gonna add our olive oil here. I'm gonna whisk these together, and be patient with it because these are really, really, really thick with our honey, our molasses. So we'll kind of whisk it. It looks like a piece of art. I guess you can't really see this, but kind of like a stained glass window until we get it super, super mixed up. And again, this is the most easy thing to prep the night before. You can make this granola up to a week before. Just keep it in a plastic bag and it'll stay fresh. So you could make the granola whenever, you know, send out invites for your holiday brunch and then just pop it in the cabinet. It's gonna last really, really well. And then all you have to do the next day is prepare those trifles. So I've got this good and mixed up. It has kind of the consistency of like runny peanut butter, maybe. So what we're gonna do is just add this to our dry ingredients. There we go. And give it a good stir. And again, be patient. This is very sticky. It has a tendency to kind of glob together, and that's okay. You can just slowly kind of work through it. I don't know if you guys have ever made, we call it puppy chow at my house, like the Chex and, you know, peanut butter and chocolate and powdered sugar. We always loved doing that, but as a kid, I got so frustrated because it would get in like little clumps, and I wanted it to be perfectly smooth. But my mom reminded me, if you got an extra chunk of chocolate, what's the worst that could happen, right? So I've just got this blended here. Again, not smooth, it's not gonna be smooth, but we've got it all kind of incorporated. So what we're gonna do is spread this out on our baking sheet. And I've got a baking sheet. I've already got it covered in parchment paper. I definitely recommend parchment paper. It's gonna keep it from sticking to the bottom. So we're gonna spread this out in as fine a line as we can. Move this over here. So you can use a spatula. I'm just using the same spoon that I was working with. Just get this laid out nicely here. And again, the thinner the layer you get it, the crispier it's gonna be, which I really, really like. So get that kind of patted down. So this is what we got right here. And now what I'm gonna do is hold off on this until our bread pudding cups come out of the oven, and then I'm gonna pop those in at 350, and we're gonna cook for 18 minutes. We're gonna stir about halfway through, so I'll be sure to kind of, show you when we get to that point. And then we'll kind of break it up and it'll be nice and crispy, okay?
Hey, Elle, I think we had a question about the bread pudding.
Absolutely.
They asked if you can use like a larger pan, like a 9x9 instead of a muffin tin.
Totally. And if it's family and that is the easiest way to prep it, a 9x9 is great. It's going to work exactly the same. And again, you can prep it the night before, cover it with the eggnog mix, the eggnog and egg mix, and put it in the fridge, cover it in saran wrap. And then you just pull it out the next day and put it in the oven. Yeah, great question.
Did I say, hey, Elle? I meant to say, hey, Lindsay.
That's okay. I knew it was me.
Oh, gosh.
What else do we have? What questions do you have about the granola so far? Any questions? How long would you bake it in a 9x9? That's a great question. So right now we're doing 30 minutes for the muffin cups and 10 minutes at the end. I'd probably add 5 to 8 minutes on the first part. So like 35 to 38 if you're using a 9x9 to make sure the middle gets set up. If you go in and jiggle it and it seems like it's mostly set, kind of like a custard, then you're good to go. That's the easiest way to test it. The toothpick doesn't really work because it's going to pull stuff out. So I would just make sure it's, lightly browned and then just a little bit jiggly. What else? Great questions. Okay, awesome. Well, if anything comes up, let me know. I'll be answering questions in the chat. So we are going to move over to our savory herb veggie crepes. If you want to take it away, Al.
You mean Taylor?
I mean Taylor. We'll get this right.
All mixed up. Okay, so you're not gonna get to see my pretty face, darn it. But I am gonna move you a little closer. Okay, so we are moving on to our yummy and lovely herby crepes. We have all the yummy herbs going into our crepes today. We have thyme, rosemary, and sage, some of the best winter time and herbs that we can have. And then, so first what I want to do is walk you through the crepe batter. And so I have, for my wet ingredients, I have 2 eggs in this bowl that I'm just gonna whisk up. Get them nice and fluffy. And then what I have here is 1 tablespoon of butter that I've melted down and let cool for just a little bit, so that it doesn't cook the eggs when we add it to them. You could even add it to the milk in order to prevent the cooking of those eggs, to ensure that. But we have, I think, 3/4 cup of milk here. You can use anything from 2% to skim milk. I used half and half because I was feeling pretty indulgent today, even with that butter in there. Okay, and so to the eggs, we'll add the milk and the butter. And we'll whisk that up. And this is a very loose batter. If you've never made crepes before, you might be concerned with how loose the batter is, but we need it to be that way so that they can spread evenly in the pan as we cook. Okay, so I'll move over here. So I just have my wet ingredients mixing. Then I have my dry ingredients, which is 1/2 cup of white flour, about 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And so what I want to do is sift this into my wet ingredients so that we don't have any clumps. Because the first time I made this recipe, it was kind of lumpy. So this should help get rid of it. Let me just make sure I get all of that out of there. Okay, and then I'll start sifting. Beautiful. And then, so we added garlic powder to this recipe to give it that, to emphasize that real savory flavor of the crepes. And I love garlic, so, but you can always use like onion powder or some other savory type spice that you like. And so I'm just mixing that all together. The most important ingredient we'll add are our herbs, and those are just about 4 tablespoons of freshly chopped rosemary, thyme, and sage. But you can feel free to use dried herbs as well. And so that looks nice right there. I'm just trying to get some of the extra little flour mixed in. So yeah, feel free to use dried herbs and then use maybe only 1 teaspoon instead of the 4 tablespoons, because dried herbs pack a lot more punch of flavor than the fresh ones. Okay, so I have my crepe batter all mixed up. I am going to cover it and then place it in the fridge to cool down. And then we will start our filling. All right. So the first thing I want to do for our veggie filling, which has a bunch of veggies, green and red for the theme of the holidays, also eggs. So it's like a veggie and egg, very tasty, savory filling. But I am going to show you just real quick how to dice up a green onion. I like to use the darker green part of the bunch because it has a little bit milder flavor and you get that nice green color. So I rinsed these and I kept the bundle together. It kind of helps to kind of organize yourself as you're cutting. So I just bunch them together and then we're gonna cut maybe 1/4 inch slices. And we want about 3/4 cup. So that really is most of these onions. Feel free to use the white parts as well if you like more of a punch of flavor, but I'm just sticking with the darker part for now. So make sure those are well chopped, and so I'm going to turn on this burner, and then I'll move you guys closer in a second. Let's see. Get the oil heating up. I have about 2 tablespoons of canola oil in the pan to get us going on our filling, and then I'm going to add the onion. And set some stuff aside. And then I'll scoot you all down. All right, cool. So we'll be working in this pan right here. So we have our 3/4 cup of onion. Your lovely green onion. And to that, we're gonna add 3/4 cup of diced roasted red pepper. And I love the roasted flavor in this recipe because it gives a nice little smokiness and more savory. But you can also use sun-dried tomatoes. That would be delicious. You could use fresh red pepper. Really any bright red veggie that you like. And so mix that in there. Okay, and so I had some extra herbs left over that I chopped up. This doesn't say it on the recipe, but I think it'd be great to add to this filling. And so I'm just gonna add those in there. And then about a clove or 2 or 3 or 4 of garlic because I love garlic. But you just, depending on how much you love garlic, that's how much you want to use. And I just minced that up earlier. Okay. Oh, this is amazing looking. Okay, and then once we have that combined, we will add our loads of spinach. And so this might be scary, like 5 whole cups of spinach, but it actually reduces down to about 1 cup. And so this whole bag has about, let's see, this has a lot of spinach in it. There's about 7 cups of spinach in this, but I'm just gonna throw it all in there just because. And you're gonna need a pretty big pan for this to fit all the spinach, but then it reduces quite a bit. So I'll get that going. Let's see, any questions so far?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, yeah, so we're like on about medium heat. And it should just take a few minutes for that spinach to start coming down. I'm gonna get our crepe batter pan ready to go, heating up. Let's see. There we go. Just on low for now. I have just a smidge of butter in there. That's gonna help the crepe not stick to the pan. So when I first made this filling, I used kale, and I used about 4 cups of kale, and I chopped it down as fine as possible. Spinach is nice because you don't have to do all that chopping. The reason you have to chop kale is because it is a tougher green, but that doesn't mean it can't be delicious. So if you're feeling like chopping kale, go for it. And so our spinach is starting to wilt. Whoops, and I'm flinging it around the plate. Oh, and you can start to see those peppers, and the red and green is popping. It smells like garlic. Runaway spinach. So yeah, for your crepe pan, you're gonna want about an 8-inch bottom to it so that your crepe can be big enough. I'm just swirling that butter around. And let's just hope and hope and hope that our crepes do not stick to the pan. Okay, so our spinach is about wilted. It's gone down quite a bit. So I'm going to start cracking our eggs into here. I'm going to clean up my area in just a bit. Let's see. So to this, we're going to add 4 eggs, 4 whole eggs. And I'm going to turn it down. Turn it down to about medium-low heat so that the eggs don't cook up too fast. 4 eggs because we're making 4 crepes. And I just want to crack them right into the pan. You could also use chicken in this recipe. About 4 ounces of chicken would be good. 4 ounces of tofu would work for your protein source. And so there's my eggs. I'm gonna wash my hands really quick. Okay. And so then you can start to kind of break up the yolk and scramble it in with everything. Smells good. I'm gonna turn the heat back up to about medium. So yeah, like I was saying, for different protein sources, you could kind of use whatever. You could even use cheese. The first time I created this recipe, I used goat cheese in the filling, and it was amazing. I'm kind of on a goat cheese kick lately. But yeah, so once that scrambles up, we are going to start making our crepes. And since we're leaving it in the hot pan while we make our crepes, you could turn the heat down and let it sit in there, and it'll finish cooking as we go. Okay, looks good to me. Okay, so our crepe batter has been chilling for about 5-10 minutes now. Really, any chill time is good to let that batter come together. It's so weird you can't see me. But with that crepe batter, you can actually leave it in the fridge overnight. You can leave it in there for, all day long. It doesn't have any baking soda or baking powder in it, so there's not going to be any like bubbles forming. So it's pretty good to stay in if you make it ahead of time. That's kind of nice. Okay, cool. Turn that down to low, and I'm gonna go grab my batter. All right, let's see. I'm gonna have to scoot you guys back a little. There we go. Any questions? Oh, you can smell the garlic from here? Oh, good. I love garlic. Okay, so I just mixing up that batter. Again, just came out of the fridge. Put this to the side. And I need 1/3 of a cup measuring spoon right here. And so my pan, even on low, is pretty hot. So I'm just gonna turn it up to about medium-low heat. And let's hope that butter does its job. So we're gonna take 1/3 of a cup of crepe batter. And we're gonna, right as we get it into the pan, we're gonna swirl it around to get it to be nice and thin and even. Okay. Can everybody see that? Well, that looks pretty nice. Okay, now I'll let it cook. And it'll really only be about 1 minute per side. Let's see. Grab another spatula. Ooh, that filling smells really good. Okay. We want it to be a little bit brown, so you can check it once you're confident in it. I'm not confident yet. It needs to cook just a little bit longer. See if I can bring you guys a little bit closer. This whole virtual thing is quite the trick. Beautiful. Okay, let's see if I can get in there. Nope, still needs to cook just a little bit. I'm gonna bring it to medium heat now. I haven't made these on this stove before, so this is a bit of an experiment.
So Taylor, while you're doing that, I'll interrupt and say that I'm taking the foil off of the bread pudding cups. So they're gonna get about another 10 minutes in the oven just to brown up there.
Okay. might be the softer section. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So that one didn't get quite as brown as I would have liked, but it did stick together and it flipped. So on the next one, we'll cook it for a little longer on the first one or on the first side. But I don't know about you all, but crepes always freaked me out. I was like, when you watch them make them on the TV shows, they have like those fancy contraptions to make them all perfect, but really it's just like making pancakes, and it's just a thin batter, so you got to be pretty delicate with them. So it's really not that scary. Okay. I'm gonna mix up this filling. It's been sitting here. And then I'm gonna turn off the heat on the filling. That looks nice. Okay, let's see if our crepe is done. Ooh, it looks nice. I'll show you. See? Oh, it looks beautiful. Nice and buttery and herby. And so I actually want to, well, I'll let that cool a bit and get another crepe going, but then I'll show you how to fill it. Let's see. Okay, next one in. Get our 1/3 of a cup of batter. Gotta swirl it around. I've never seen a crepe with a bunch of herbs in it, so it's kind of a nice thing. It'll add a good texture to it. Okay, so I'll scooch it back so that you can see this one. And then I'm gonna give my hands a quick wash before we fill this crepe. Okay, oh, this crepe needs flipped. And there we go. Oh, perfect. See, that one came out a little better. And I am going to turn off the heat just for now so that I can show you how to wrap up the crepe. And so a trick I learned is that whichever side looks prettier is the side you want to have facing the plate. So I think this side is prettier, so I'm going to put it down. That way when you roll it, that'll be what shows on the outside. So I am going to bring over a scoop of our gorgeous filling. Okay. All that egg, pepper, spinach, garlic. Looks good to me. Okay. And then we will fold in these outer edges. I've set up the filling to where it's kind of lengthwise like a burrito, and I'll fold those in and then take the other end and kind of gently fold it over and eventually roll it over into like a little burrito essentially, but it's a crepe. And so isn't that neat? So I have more crepes to fill and make, but if we want to move on to the next recipe, we can, or if anybody has questions. Let's see.
We love your enthusiasm.
Oh, good. How could you not be about these crepes? All right. Yeah, just holler if you have any questions. A really good non-stick pan is the best for this. That way you don't even have to use butter or cooking spray.
Taylor, can you prep the crepes ahead of time?
You can, but just when you go to store them, you'll want to, you won't want the crepes to be right on top of each other because they might get kind of gummy and stick to each other. So I would line like foil or parchment paper in between.
And you zap them in the microwave when you're ready to serve them?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Alrighty. Well, Lindsay, how are we doing on the bread pudding? Do you want to go over that, or are we good to go on the next recipe?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick update. So I took the foil off, just take it off the top. It's going to stick a little, not a big deal. Just pop it off. And then I actually reduced the temperature so we could go ahead and put the granola in as well. So we're going to give the bread pudding cups about 10 to 12 when they look really, really brown and nice and crispy. And then the granola, I'll stir it about 8 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes, and then we'll take them out at about 18 minutes. So I will keep you updated. Oh, we can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
There you go. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So I will be teaching how to do the herby hollandaise sauce. And this sauce is meant for topping on top of the crepes, but can also be used for some roasted veggies. It tastes great with asparagus. It can also be used on eggs Benedict. So it's a pretty versatile recipe that we can use. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started on this one. So the first thing that I will be doing is demoing how we cut the sage. I have pre-cut the rosemary, so I am just going to demo how we're going to cut the sage here. So I have my cutting board ready. I apologize, you won't be able to see me in here, but when I got the sage, it came in this form just here on the stem. And in order to cut this, obviously we want to make sure we wash it before we cut it, along with the rosemary. But we are just going to pull the sprigs off of the stem. And the stem will not hurt us in this recipe. If you can't get it fully off the stem, that's not a big deal. But we just want to make sure to pull those off the stem. And then I have them just kind of lined up all together. For this recipe, we'll be needing a teaspoon of each sage and rosemary. So I have them lined up here, and for chopping them, I'm just going to make sure my fingers are not in the way, and I have them all in a little bunch. So I will just start by cutting them as finely as possible. And at this point, they're still pretty big chunks. So I'm going to go ahead and just take my knife and just chop them as finely as I possibly can. We don't want any like big chunks in the sauce. So we're just going to finely chop those up. And then you can group them back together, kind of pull them all in, and then do the same thing. Just really making sure that those are really finely chopped. And mine are looking pretty finely chopped. I already have mine pre-measured for the recipe, but they should be pretty small. I don't know if you can see those, but as small as you possibly can. And like I said, you want to do the same thing for the rosemary. So my rosemary came on a nice long stem. So in that case, I would just peel the leaves off from the stem, and you'll just get leaf that looks like this, and you'll just group them together and do the same thing, chop them up as finely as possible so that you don't have some big chunks in there. So the next thing that I will be demoing for this recipe is how we're going to separate the egg from, obviously we want to use the egg yolk in this recipe, so we're going to be separating the egg yolk from the egg whites. So what I have done is I have got 2 small bowls put up next to each other, and for this I'm going to want to crack the egg right down the middle if I can. Obviously you're not going to get the perfect crack for this, so not a big deal, but you just want to make sure to do it right down the middle if you can. So I just cracked my egg, and I have this bowl set up for the egg whites. And so I'm going to go over this bowl and open the egg. And you are going to get the egg whites sort of coming out of the shell. And we are just going to be passing the egg back and forth between the 2 shells in order to really separate that egg yolk. And you want to keep the yolk in the shell as much as possible. It can be easy to kind of puncture the yolk with the shell. So just try to pass that back and forth until you feel like most of the yolk is out, or most of the egg white is out. And it doesn't need to be perfect, but you're just going to pass those eggs, or pass the egg back and forth between those shells until you feel like you've got the yolk isolated. And then you're going to put the yolk into that bowl. For this recipe, we'll be using 3 eggs. I already have 2 of my eggs cracked and ready to go. So I'm just going to combine this yolk with the rest of mine, and just want to make sure to wash your hands after you're done handling eggs. All right, so now that I've washed my hands, we are good to move on to the next step. So for this recipe, we will not be using the egg whites, and I have my egg white here from one of my eggs. You'll obviously have 3 of them from cracking 3 of your eggs, but you can save these egg whites in the fridge if you wish to. You can use it for scrambled eggs or whatever you want, or you can just discard it since we will not be using it for this recipe. So the next step that we are going to do is to melt our butter. So this recipe calls for half a cup of unsalted butter, and it is pretty important that you are using unsalted butter in this recipe because the salted butter can make it turn out a little bit too salty. So if you have unsalted butter, go ahead and use that. If you don't, this recipe calls for about 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. Just make sure you're not adding that salt if you're using salted butter, just so that the sauce doesn't turn out too salty. So what I've done here is I have put my half a cup of butter in a measuring cup that is microwave safe. And we just want to make sure that it has a pour spout on it. You can use anything with a pour spout. If you don't, it's not a huge deal. You can use just a normal bowl. It might get a little bit messy when you're adding it into the blender, but that's not a huge deal. So I'm going to take this butter and cover it with a paper towel. I just do this so that it doesn't splatter in the microwave and you're not losing any of your butter. And I want to make sure that this butter gets really hot and fully melted. So the heat of this butter will contribute to the thickness of the sauce. So we really want to make sure that it's nice and hot. So I'm going to place that in the microwave for about a minute. You can kind of, put it in for 30 seconds, check on it, just see where it's at, but it should be fully melted and hot. So I'm going to go ahead and place this in the microwave for about a minute. And then we are good to move on to the next step. So the next step for this recipe will be adding the ingredients to the blender. And I have my blender right here. If you don't have a normal blender, you can use an immersion blender and just like a mixing bowl, and that should work just fine as well. So I have my blender here, and the first thing that we are going to add are the egg yolks. So I'm going to take my egg yolks and add them into the blender. Making sure that all of them get in there. Awesome. And then next we will be adding 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. So I used a fresh lemon for this and just squeezed it into this bowl and measured it out. If you just have like refrigerated lemon juice, that should work just fine as well. So I'm gonna pour that in there, and it looks like my butter is done. I'm just gonna turn off the timer real quick. And the next step will be to add the Dijon mustard. I would say you could use regular mustard for this recipe. It might add a little bit of flavor, but I would definitely recommend Dijon. So I have that pre-measured here in my bowl, and I'm just going to scrape that in, trying to get as much of it as I can out of this bowl. All right, and the next step is to add the cayenne pepper and salt. If you don't like the flavor that cayenne pepper has, or if you don't like the spice, you can totally use just regular black pepper in the same amount, and that should work just fine. So I have my cayenne pepper and my salt in this little dish, and I'm gonna add that into my blender. And then lastly, I have my finely chopped herbs. I already have them pre-measured in here, so I'm just going to add those into the blender. And the next step is we are going to blend this on high for about 5 seconds. So I'm just gonna put the top here on the blender and put it on high. It's really important to put it on the highest speed that your blender has, just to fully mix those ingredients up. It doesn't have to be 5 seconds, just kind of whenever you notice that all of the ingredients are totally blended. I'm gonna put you guys on mute real quick so that you aren't hearing the blender, and I'll be back in a second. And take my butter out of the microwave, check that it's fully hot and fully melted, and then we will be adding that into the blender. All right, so it looks like my butter is pretty hot and pretty blended. It's steaming a bit, so that's a good sign. And I have this little top here on my blender that I can remove to add the butter. If you don't have a top like this, you can just take off the top a little bit, but we will be blending with the top off. So I just want to let you guys know that, just in case we get any like splatters or anything like that. But I am going to put my blender on about medium or low to slowly add the butter to. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll be slowly pouring this hot butter into the blender. It's very important that you do this pretty slowly, just so it gives it a chance to mix together. So I'm going to put you guys on mute again so you don't have to hear the blender, and I will be blending these ingredients together. We're gonna go ahead and take the top off the blender, and the sauce should be ready to serve. So I'm going to pour it into a serving bowl, and it should have a nice thick texture. That hot butter really contributes to the thickness of this sauce. And it looks like the sauce is ready to go. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but it should be pretty thick. And then this sauce should be served pretty quickly after it's made, just because the butter tends to separate from the rest of the ingredients. So I would say try to serve it within 10 to 15 minutes of making it, just so that that separation doesn't happen. And if you made the crepes with us, you can go ahead and drizzle this on top. As I said, it doesn't save super well in the fridge, but if you would like to use it for a different recipe, like Eggs Benedict in the morning or something like that, you can go ahead and put it in a container. Just make sure that container is covered, and then you can bring it out in the morning or whenever you decide to use it. To reheat it, we want to make sure to put it in a saucepan on low and just really continue stirring it until it's got that texture that you're looking for. When it comes out of the fridge, it should be about like the consistency of butter. It will really form up into more of a solid substance. So you just want to blend that, heat that in the saucepan until it is looking ready to go. And I just saw the question in the chat. Is this sauce safe with raw egg yolks? So we do use raw egg yolks in it, but it is safe. If you are not comfortable with the raw egg yolks, I do not have a modification for this if you're not using raw egg yolks, but I know through my research in creating this recipe that there are some really good options that use Greek yogurt and other substances like that that can replace that raw egg if that's something that you are concerned about. But this should be ready to drizzle over the crepes, and if you guys have any other questions, just put them in the chat, and I will pass this over to Lindsay.
Thanks, Al. Okay. We'll come back here, and if you guys have any additional questions for Taylor or Al or me, feel free to keep putting them in the chat. So I wanted to show you the progress we've made over here. I pulled out our bread pudding cups from the oven. I just put them on a little plate. You can see they're still in their little paper liners, and then when you get ready to serve, I would just serve them in the liners. They should pop out pretty easily, especially if they get a minute to like cool and set up, but they're absolutely delicious. They got nice and brown on the top. You know, a little bit of that is our cinnamon and a little bit of that is our sugar. So delicious. And then I pulled our granola out of the oven, so I can still hear it popping and crackling. It smells so wonderful. I can just really smell the ginger. We put it in for 18 minutes. I stirred it at about 10 minutes. Definitely keep an eye on it those last few minutes because the sugar, again, can overcook pretty quickly. So just keep an eye on it. If it looks like it's getting really, really dark, you can pull it out. And then just let it sit and cool and set up. And it's going to get that granola consistency that we're all familiar with. I don't know if you can hear it. It's pretty crispy. So what I want to do now is just assemble our little trifles. So I'm going to use a wine glass because I think they're really fun and tall and fancy. You can use like an ice cream glass. You can use a stemless wine glass. You can use a mason jar. I know those are very popular, but I like the wine glasses. I think they sit up really pretty on a table. So I have vanilla yogurt and I've got like a blueberry mixed in yogurt. The cool part about this, kind of like the rest of our recipes, is you have the option of modifying this for however works for your family. If you wanted to use like a coconut-based yogurt, Greek yogurt, if you wanted it more tangy, you could go just like with a plain Greek yogurt. I know they have, I think, soy-based. So totally up to you. You pick your yogurt. And what we're gonna do is just drop it down. We're gonna layer it. So I'm gonna stir it up a little bit. We're gonna drop it down into our container. You guys see this? I'll tilt you down a little bit. And this is totally up to you. You can put so many things in this. I have chopped up here in our bowl. I've got some pears, some Bartlett pears, which are really sweet. And I've got some Honeycrisp apples, which are my favorite, and then some tangerine pieces. So I'm just gonna layer a little bit of this in. I'm gonna put some pears in our first layer here, and then sprinkle some granola in there. Oh, it's so nice and crispy now. Topping this off. And again, I let it cool for about 5 minutes when I pulled it out, but you can make it a few days ahead. Just don't package it when it's hot because it'll get steamy. So just let it sit out and cool. So I did a layer of that, and I'm going to do some blueberry yogurt. Just kind of mix this in a little bit. And this is so pretty. I don't have a clear glass, but if you have a clear glass, you get such a pretty distinct design in there from all of the layers. I'm gonna put some oranges in here, and you know, now is the best time to start really trying to integrate some of that citrus and berries at the end of the season. Apples and pears are obviously in season, really brightens it up, get some extra vitamin C in there as we're fighting off winter colds and who knows what else. Just trying to boost the vitamins there. So again, I'm gonna top with some more granola here, as much or as little as you like. And then let's do one more round. I'm gonna do another round of our yogurt here. And then I'm just gonna top it with some apples because I think those are really pretty to have out on the table. Okay, beautiful. So if you can see it here, we've got all these different layers with the yogurt and the granola and the fruit. These are so fun. I know if you have kids in the house over the holidays, they love to help in the kitchen, and this is a great way they can assemble their own. If you are looking for something sweeter, you can obviously throw in chocolate chips. You can do more of the like candied and dried fruit. Those are really good and sweet. Again, any kind of flavored yogurt, anything like that. These are just such a fun way that everybody can kind of make their own. Great. Any questions about that? And now we can open it up for questions about anything for Elle and Taylor about the menu in general.
I just wanted to add, I did not season the filling at all, and it actually came out really nicely because of those roasted red peppers. Oftentimes in a jar, if something comes in a jar, there's going to be quite a bit of sodium in it, and so if you're wanting to limit sodium, look for a low sodium option, but if you just find the regular ones in a jar, to just don't add salt, and it has a perfect level of flavor.
Awesome. They look so yummy.
They are. Here, I'm going to show you. They're just so beautiful.
Look at it, and your folding skills, like a master.
That red and green, and then the herbs really pop.
Now we just need to get Elle to run the hollandaise sauce over to your house, and you can just
They would be so good.
Any other questions for us, guys? Thanks for joining. Again, I think I've probably met a bunch of you, or at least a handful of you in person for some in-person classes, but this was, you know, considering the times, I think this was an awesome alternative, and I'm so glad that everybody showed up today.
Awesome. If there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and finish things out. Thank you three so much. It was really wonderful. We appreciate your time so much. If anyone, like I said, doesn't get that email from me tomorrow, don't hesitate to reach out. And I'm happy to share all of those materials, and the recording will be on our YouTube channel along with last week's. So thank you all so much. Have a great start to your holiday season next week with Thanksgiving. Hopefully you get to enjoy some time with your families. But we appreciate you all so much. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Dakota. Thanks, everyone.